All right, moving on to talking about some theorems about perpendicular lines. Now, a theorem could be used as a shortcut, but it's basically a statement that we accept as true. A theorem could be shortcuts that we use to solve our puzzles. So let's get to naming some of these. All right angles are blank. All right angles are congruent. You know that all right angles equal 90 degrees. So if angle A equals 90 degrees and angle B equals 90 degrees, then they're congruent. They have the same measure. If two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form what? Well, we know that they form right angles, but what else do we know about angles 2, 3, and 4 here? If this angle 1 is 90 degrees, well, that means that over here is 90 degrees too, right? 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Intersects to form 4 right angles. All those angles are right. If two lines intersect to form adjacent congruent angles, so what does that mean? Two lines intersect. We have two lines here intersecting to form adjacent congruent. Adjacent means back to back, so these two angles, and they're congruent, which means they have the same measure. Then the lines are what? Well, let's think about this. Two lines that intersect to form congruent adjacent angles. That means that the measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 2. Think of this as like a puzzle. I know that together these two angles add up to 180. So that means that the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180. But these two are going to be the same measure. They're the same measure. So what does that mean? What two numbers added to, or what one number added together is going to equal 180? It's kind of like saying, if I were to name this angle measure x, and the measure of angle 2 is also x because they're the same, right? It equals 180. If I were to do a little algebra, I'd know that 2x equals 80. 2 times what is 180? 90. That means that if two lines intersect to form adjacent congruent angles, then those lines are perpendicular. And those lines are perpendicular. If you're a little confused by that one, think about it as we're trying to find twins, two of the same angle measure that add up to 180. The only number that works would be 90. 90 plus 90 is 180. They have to be twins. They have to match. Which means that these two lines are perpendicular because we know that if two lines are perpendicular, they meet at 90 degrees. All right, finally, if two sides of adjacent acute angles are perpendicular, what does this mean? Two sides of adjacent acute angles. Adjacent angles are angles that are back to back. So we have this angle here, angle 3, and then we have this angle here, angle 4. They're back to back and they're both acute. It's saying that if those two sides that meet, the two unshared sides, are perpendicular, like it showed us right here, there's a square. If those two sides are perpendicular, then that means that 3 and 4 add up to what? What's the measure of angle FEH? It's a right angle, so that means it's 90 degrees. Two angles together that are 90 degrees are complementary. Complementary. All right, let's practice with this to see what this really looks like. Here are some puzzles. What they give us something about each diagram to help us figure out the missing variable. That's what we're looking for, is the value of the variable, so either x, y, or z. This one's telling us that angle EFG EFG is congruent to angle HFG. So these two angles are congruent. And the angles are back to back, making up a straight line. What does that mean about these two angles? They're congruent. They add up to 180. So that means that this side's also 5x. Well, you have two halves here, and what's half of 180? It's 90. This might seem, I think that this is the hardest one, honestly, because it's kind of hard to visualize, but we have two angles that are equal, and they're supplementary. Two equal angles that are supplementary have to both be 90. So 5x equals 90. What does x equal? Well, we'd have to do a little algebra, divide both sides by 5, and I end up getting 18. If this isn't sitting well with you, you also could have thought of seeing both of these as 5x, because it did tell you that they're congruent, and done 5x plus 5x equals 180. A little bit of supplementary or angle addition postulate, which you guys did really well on in the first chapter. And you would have ended up getting 10x equals 180, and you would have gotten the same answer. All right, the next one. We have AB, ray AB, is perpendicular to ray AD. Perpendicular, meaning they meet at a 90-degree angle. All right, what can we do with this? Let's establish what we know. If these angles meet at 90 degrees, that means that together they add up to 90 degrees. This is a lot like angle addition postulate. If AB and AD are perpendicular, that means that these two angles add up to 90. So that means that 36 plus 9y equal what? 90 degrees. Now we can just do a little bit of algebra to figure out what y equals. We can move 36 over to the other side because we want to get y alone. So now we have 9y equals 54. Then we can divide both sides by 9. We get y equals 6. All right, finally, number 9. It tells us that ray KJ and ray KL are perpendicular. Means they meet at a 90-degree angle. And that angle JKM, which is this one, is equal to angle MKL. MKL, they're congruent, so they have equal measures. So they even labeled both measures as Z. They're going to call them both Z because they're the same thing, and we can solve for Z. So what does that mean? It means that Z plus Z equals 90. I'll do that little cross in the middle of a Z so you guys don't think it's a 2. So Z plus Z is 90. It's also like saying 2Z equals 90. You can think of it either way. Now this might remind you a little bit of bisecting, because it is. But we found it by saying that we have two lines that are perpendicular making 90 degrees, and then two congruent angles making up that 90-degree angle. So we did a little bit of logic, said, okay, Z plus Z must equal 90. 2 times Z equals 90. What's Z? 45. These are tricky, so take your time on them. Definitely write down every step. Give these next ones a shot.